We've probably all heard somewhat about website accessibility, and you may have heard it. You may have thought, like, oh, well, maybe it's just a buzzword, or maybe it's just this thing that's kind of coming around, and I don't really need to pay attention. Well, the thing is that when it comes to web design and just really in general, we do need to pay attention to website accessibility. And what I want to do today is just shed just a little bit of light of website accessibility, what it is and why it's important. I am by no means any sort of expert on this or any sort of, no like super in-depth knowledge, but I do know enough in order to make sure that websites are website accessible and that they get a good rating, and that I make sure that my websites are as accessible as I can with the tools that I have available. And I want to make sure that you also know the tools that you have available, and also to make sure that you are paying attention to this, because it is important that we make sure that our websites are accessible for anybody that comes into contact with it. So really we have to ask, what is website accessibility? And website accessibility can really be narrowed down to making sure that your website is accessible to anybody. It doesn't matter if they have a hearing impairment, maybe a vision impairment, or even a physical impairment. We need to make sure that our website is able to be used by anyone that comes and visits our website. And when we do that, we make sure that our website is inclusive and that we can make sure that everybody has a great experience when they get there. And there's a couple of ways that you can do that. A couple of ways to make sure that your website is accessible. If you're wanting a lot more information, or you wanted a little bit more than what I'm giving today, and you kind of want to dig a little deeper down into what is website accessibility, I'm going to leave some links down below. And with those links, you can check out some of the WCAG and some Google links and different things where they kind of go a little bit more in depth into those. And I'm also going to show you some resources in my blog as well, but I just want to give you a couple of quick ways that you can make sure that your website is accessible. One of the ways that you can check to see how accessible your website is to run it through a website accessibility checker. There are some free ones, and there are also some paid ones that you can do, and you can even run it through Lighthouse, Google Lighthouse, or Google PageSpeed. They can show you, as well as GT Metrics. So there's some free resources out there as well as paid resources that will help you see just how accessible your website is. And what's great is that most of the time, in fact all the time, they're going to tell you, well, hey, these are the things that you need to work on, and then you can go and fix those things. So one of the things that you can do as you're creating your website and as you're looking at your website is checking to make sure that you put alt text on your image, or alternative text for your image. Basically what this is that you are explaining, not necessarily in super fine detail, but you are explaining what the image is. So if you have a person sitting at a desk, or if they're sitting in an office, if you have a car driving down the road, you want to make sure that your alt text, that the tag on there describes what is going on in the scene. Now, when I say that, you're not going to write a book. You're not trying to write a novel and trying to get down to the emotion of what's happening and all that. You're just making it so that when screen readers get to that image, they can tell the person who's listening, they can tell the person as they're reading it in good detail, that they can understand and understand what the image is. So if you say something, woman sitting at a bench in a park reading a book while kids play outside with a kite, something like that, right? So that the screen reader knows and that the person knows what the image is about. The next thing you want to do is that you want to make sure that you have good contrast. So colors, you want to make sure that there's good contrast between the dark and the light, and between the colors, so that it's easily readable. And the reason why you want to do this is, one, because you want to make sure that anybody can read it, but two, you want to make sure that there's good contrast. So especially if somebody has a color blindness or is sensitive to certain colors, you want to make sure that the colors have good contrast. And there's a great resource for you to be able to check on that as well. Like I said, I'm going to leave that in my blog as well as a link on here. And what you want to do is that you want to make sure that you have good contrast between what you have written down and the background and all that sort of stuff. So you want to make sure that you have a good contrast and that your colors make sense so that people can read it. This also really helps when you're going into branding, but I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. So kind of with that is that you also want to look at text. You want to make sure that text is a good size. You don't want to have it too small, and you want to make sure that you can also zoom in on it. So you want to make sure that your website is able to be zoomed in so that they can use their screen and they can zoom in really close so they can read what is said on the screen. So far you want to make sure that you have good alt text on your images. You want to make sure that you have good color contrast. You want to make sure that your text is easily readable, and you also really want good navigation. You want it to make sense. You want to go from header 1, header 2, header 3, paragraphs, things like that. You want to make sure that it makes sense, that this navigation makes sense. You also want to make sure that you have descriptive URLs. So in other words, you want to make sure that you have something that says home, or something that says blog, or if you have a blog that you don't put the full title. So let's say you have 10 reasons on why you should walk your dog during the rain but not at night, only on days that end with Y, or something like that, right? You want to make sure that you condense down whatever your title is. So you could put 3 reasons to walk your dog, or something to that extent. You want to make sure that your title is legible and also easily readable so that the person knows what it's about. Now, you may have noticed what's also great about making your website accessible for those with impairments is that this is actually the foundation and really good for good SEO and good user experience regardless of who visits your website, because you want to make sure that you have easily readable text. You want to make sure that your colors have good contrast. You want to make sure that you have descriptive URLs, that you have good alt text for your images. You want to make sure of all of these things already in your website. So not only does it help with website accessibility, this is also really foundational for how you should think about your colors and your branding and the content that you're going to put on your website in general. So those are just some quick tips. If you want to see more, check out my blog post. I'm also going to leave links down below, like I said. If you have any questions, please feel free to send me a comment. I'll do my best to respond. If you are looking to make sure that your website is accessible, and you also want to make sure that you have the 5 essentials on your website, check out my website, check out my 5 essentials guide, download that today, and you can start making changes on your website to make sure that it's effective and that it turns visitors into clients. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.